When we are slowing down our metabolism, it's due to inactivity. It's due to the fact that we're in protection mode, that we are favoring fat storage, we're favoring survival. And this, of course, happens when we have unresolved traumas, like I shared with you, when we have dysregulated emotions, we don't know how to cope with certain emotions, and we've slowed down our metabolism when we've been a sugar burner. Are you ready to bring your dream body and health into life, but just can't seem to keep the motivation going? And is it finally time to address the self-sabotage and the unwanted eating behaviors such as binge eating, emotional eating, and nighttime eating that you know are getting in the way of your goals? Do you ever wonder what it would take for you to feel in control of your rituals so that you can stay consistent and see results? Welcome to this week's special Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, where you'll learn how to overcome unwanted eating behavior and other self-sabotaging habits by shifting your nervous system so that your body works with you instead of against you. I'm your host, Sherry Shaban, and with each episode, I am honored to be your coach and guide in the journey to make peace with food and find food and body freedom so that struggle with weight is a thing of the past. When you tune in every Thursday on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, you'll catch the latest conversation on unwanted eating behaviors and learn how to shift the nervous system, rewire the brain to new patterns, and end the food and body obsession so you finally feel relaxed and no longer confused around food. Now, before we begin, I want to quickly invite you to grab a free copy of my Food Freedom ebook that I have for you at makepeacewithfood.com. And if you find that this conversation resonates with you today, then I also want to invite you to join our free Make Peace with Food Facebook community at myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com, where you can connect with me and my team directly. The links are in the show notes. And of course, if you know somebody who you feel could benefit from these conversations and discussions, make sure to share this podcast with them too. All right, athletes, now let's get into it. The question everybody wants to know, what slows down metabolism? No, it's not genetics. It is not genetics. It is not genetics. It is not genetics. Why do I say that? Yesterday, I spoke about this thing called epigenetics. It's a huge study now in genetics. And genetics means that there is this gene that can express something in particular. And back in the day, we used to think that, well, it's my genetics. If I have this gene, that means I'm going to have this thing. And what we used to think is that this gene equals this thing. But now that's not true. What we've actually discovered through the field of epigenetics is that genes are probabilities. They are turned on or turned off or expressed because of environmental factors, and this changes the probability. So every gene is just a probability of something happening. You can have a high probability or a low probability. And so if, let's say, for example, a particular type of cancer or diabetes, let's say, runs in the family, well, most often it's nurture versus nature. It's because of lifestyle changes or choices, or maybe the way that we're doing certain habits that's actually causing the expression of that gene or facilitating it. So everything that we're doing in our environment, all of our habits facilitate that gene expression. And I hope that feels like good news for us because, okay, so Sherry, if it's not genetics, then what is it? Well, what slows down metabolism is cycles of crash dieting. Yeah, if you've been dieting for a very long time, you've slowed down your metabolism. This was one of the questions, great question that I got in the beginning. Your body, first of all, doesn't know how many calories it needs anymore. You've lost that intuitive connection with your body knowing how much energy is required. And the other thing too is every time you crash diet, like I shared earlier, your body sees that as harm, as potential harm. Food scarcity, imposed food scarcity is traumatic. It actually triggers the nervous system. It triggers protection mode. And not just that, but every single time we diet, sure, we get on the scale and we're like, yay, I've lost 20 pounds in 1 week. But the majority of what we actually end up losing because we're starving, the body is so intelligent. When we don't eat enough, it's going to find that energy somewhere. And it needs precious proteins. Proteins are so important because it helps us create hormones and enzymes and really helps regulate a lot of different functions in the body just so that we can stay alive, so that we can breathe, so that our heartbeat can continue. And so if it doesn't find access to enough food, it's going to go to your tissue to start pulling up protein. And there's this show called Alone. I don't know if you've watched it. They take a group of 10 people, they drop them off somewhere in Alaska, and they basically have to fend for themselves. They have to build shelter. They have to find their own food. And they have a medical team coming in frequently to check their weight to see how they're doing. And the first thing, of course, that happens is they start to use body fat. Then after a while, of course, they're using lean body mass. Because that's the protein, by the way, the muscle tissue on your body, because you don't just live off of fat. Your body lives off of carbohydrates for energy, lives off of protein to build certain things such as hormones and enzymes. And it uses also fat for hormones, for putting a nice layer and lubricant around nerves and so on and so forth. But at one point, once that reserve is done, once the body is tapped into as much muscle tissue as possible, it now moves into organs. And so they start to pull people off the show when they're like, oh my goodness, you've lost way too much weight too quickly. You're going to go into shock soon. Like the next step is that your body's actually going to start to eat its own organs to stay alive. That's how intelligent the body is. So when we restrict calories for too long, assuming because this app somehow told us that by this date we should lose this many pounds if we do this much restriction, then what we're actually doing is eating away at that precious muscle tissue. And that muscle tissue is so important because that's where all the magic happens. That's actually where we burn our calories. Muscle tissue, lean body mass, that is the most metabolically active tissue that we have in our body. That's where we move all day. Skeletal muscle is how we move. It's how we get things done. It's how we also pump circulation everywhere in the body. And therefore we require a lot of energy. And so when we start to lose this precious tissue, we also lose that ability to burn calories at rest. And you may have heard of basal metabolic rate, BMR. That's the ability of you to burn calories while you're just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. This is the amount of calories that you require just to sustain your existence, just to sustain you to be alive. And so when you've been dieting over and over again, eating away every single time at precious muscle tissue, thinking that you're losing weight, then you are actually lowering that metabolic rate. So what happens is once you start eating normally, all of a sudden you gain more weight. Why? Because the potential for you to burn calories has decreased. And so you go on this crash diet. You get super excited and super motivated. You only have to do this for about 21 days. You step on the scale. You've lost a whole bunch of weight. You feel great. But what you don't know is the majority of that weight that you've lost is muscle tissue, which is your calorie burning capacity. It's the ability for you to burn calories. And so then what do? Cool, let me go back to my regular ways. I don't have to diet anymore. The diet's over. And then your metabolism has slowed down. And now whatever you used to eat is now being stored as energy. And you notice that even though you've lost 10 or 15 or 20 pounds, you've gained back all that weight and even more. And then what do? You do it again. You find another diet. And you're successful because the scale said you've lost weight. But then what happens? You go back to eating normally and you notice that you've gained even more weight. And now you've been doing this for years and years and years and years. And so no wonder you feel like you have a slow metabolism. And the thing is, the truth is about lean body mass is it's natural for us as women, as of the age of about 21 or so, to start to decrease or lose 1% lean body mass every single year. And for men around the age of 25, they start to lose 1% lean body mass every year because the body has this rule. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so that's why sometimes we also think like, oh, as you get older, you just put on weight. But it's because we're not using that muscle tissue. When we were younger, we were active and we were involved in sports and we used to walk everywhere. We used to do all these things. But then all of a sudden now we move to the suburbs, we drive everywhere, we have kids, we're too busy to do stuff, we don't have time to exercise. And slowly the body starts to lose a little bit of muscle tissue every single year. And that's how we slow down metabolism. But the good news is it's so reversible. It is actually so fast to put on lean body mass. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get huge and jacked. It just really means that you're going to be able to increase that efficiency for you to be able to burn more calories at rest. And so I've pretty much covered already most of these, that when we are slowing down our metabolism, it's due to inactivity. It's due to the fact that we're in protection mode, that we are favoring fat storage, we're favoring survival. And this, of course, happens when we have unresolved traumas, like I shared with you, when we have dysregulated emotions, we don't know how to cope with certain emotions, and we've slowed down our metabolism when we've been a sugar burner. We've adapted to constantly having to eat something that's high in refined sugars due to a lot of circulating cortisol, due to constantly stimulating insulin, and we've upregulated those genes to express the machinery to really need sugar in order for us to be able to access energy. So even though we have all this stored body fat, we just don't know what to do with it. And gut inflammation is another big one. This is what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Gut inflammation is really, really, really important because, like I shared on day one, that's where we actually have that machinery that can do all of this for us. When there's inflammation in the gut at all time, we are not maximizing that digestive system's ability to break down foods, to assimilate foods. We're also not making the liver important, and the liver is where everything starts to break down. It's where fat is oxidized. It's where it's that powerhouse for us. So it's really important to understand that everything is really, really tied in together, but we've slowed down our metabolism over years due to constantly being in protection mode, to constantly dieting, yo-yo dieting. If you've noticed that you have that tendency to put on 30 pounds, release 30 pounds, put on 50 pounds, release 30 pounds, put on 80 pounds, release 50, and it's just been this constant yo-yo, well, that's a great indicator that you've eaten away at a lot of your lean body mass, and that's one of the reasons why you're experiencing this. Now, before I move on and start to wrap it up for you, I also want to mention here semaglutides. Semaglutides, you may have heard of these. These are now hitting the market, and they're actually originally a medication for diabetes, but now they're pushed for weight loss. And you have to understand that there's a big business behind this. And this is not where I want the conversation to go, but I do want to just drop that here for you. But Wegovy or Ozempic, okay, they're very harmful in the long term because both of these medications actually, when you take them on, it's true, you will experience weight loss, but the majority of the weight loss now that they're coming back to report is lean body mass. And so these are medications that as soon as you get off of, all the weight comes right back and more and more. People who've been on this for a long time can never get off of it. And it's a very expensive medication. If you don't have insurance covering it, you're looking at about 1,000 USD every single month to be on these medications. And again, they don't resolve the problem. They just help you work on the side effects, the symptoms of the problem. And so when you get off of these medications, weight comes back and more, and most people are even more discouraged. And there are so many different side effects to it. I have somebody I'm working with, she has actual gastric paralysis from taking Ozempic. And the list goes on and on. Again, I won't make this conversation about that, but I do want to add that taking something like Wegovy and Ozempic is the equivalent of taking a laxative daily. At one point, your body just won't know how to eliminate if you take a laxative every single day and rely on that, right? You know that. Well, Ozempic works in the same way. When you take that for a prolonged period of time, or any other semaglutide, Ozempic is just a manufacturing name. If you're taking that for a long amount of time, your body starts to adapt to that, and you won't be able to regulate your metabolism after prolonged use. Thank you for listening to this week's Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast. If this has resonated with you today, I want to invite you to subscribe to the show so you never miss a beat. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, then please share this episode with them. Let's work together to help as many people as possible make peace with food and fall in love with fitness. And by the way, I need to mention that if you rate and review this podcast on iTunes and send over the screenshot to Sherry at sherryshaban.com, you'll receive a $500 voucher to join me at one of my upcoming retreats or to use it in our Make Peace with Food coaching program. And don't forget to visit myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com to join the free Facebook group for more resources. And remember, athlete, you are an inspiration. I cannot wait to hear your story.